Have you given any thought about going off any of your medications? Hey, what's shaking bacon? My name is Bruno Panucci. I hope you're doing well. So I want you to keep in mind, if you're considering going off any of your medications, you should always do this doctor supervised. The problem is most doctors don't want you to go off your medications, and we'll get into that in a minute. But first, if you can, I'd like you to like, comment, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. I really appreciate it. Hit that little bell notification if you could. It really helps support the channel. Thanks a lot. So I've gone off some of my meds through the years, and doctors haven't liked it, and other doctors are fine with it. I've been seeing different cardiologists over the last number of years, and some of them have been outright jerks about it. And some of them have been like, okay, well, it's your choice. I totally understand why you don't want to do this. So I'll talk about my personal reasons why I've gone off certain medications and why I've stayed with others. So for example, since I've been 20 years old, I've been taking thyroid medication. And I found that as the years went on, my thyroid medication had to get stronger and stronger and stronger. And it got to the point after 25 years, I was on one of the strongest doses of thyroid medication that people could be put on because my thyroid was getting weaker and weaker and weaker. Well, why is that? Well, because I was putting something in my body that was doing the job of my thyroid gland. So my thyroid gland, which was underactive when I started dealing with my hypothyroid, was only slightly underactive. The doctor said, it's just marginal. We're going to put you on the weakest dose of medication. So over a 25-year window, that got so strong. And what happened was when I started doing a carnivore diet and I started doing 20 minutes of cardio 3 times a week, I was doing intermittent fasting and I was getting some supplementation. My thyroid, for the first time in 25 years, got better. I started getting symptoms of hyperthyroidism, and I was like, oh dear, I better back off of these exercises because I was getting like palpitations in my chest. And I recognized that right away as symptoms of hyperthyroidism. And I thought, no way, that only took like 2 weeks, 3 weeks before I started getting these symptoms. So I backed off of the exercising because that's not safe to do, especially with a history of a heart attack like I've had. But I went to my doctor and I got my blood tested. So it took another 2 or 3 weeks to get all that done. And then sure enough, my thyroid was 20% stronger. I had a drop in my medication by 20% for the first time in 25 years. So there's a way sometimes you can manipulate your body. And when it comes to my thyroid medication, I've been steady at this new level for the last 25 years. I never got back onto that perfect recipe. I focused on other things. Like at the time, I wasn't consistent with a carnivore diet. I'd go on it and off it. So once you're consistent, it's a whole other arena you're in. So there are other medications I was put on, like after my heart attack. They put me on aspirin, blood thinner medication, and cholesterol medication. So I understood the cholesterol medication to a certain point because I knew they would put me on that because I've had high cholesterol, definitely in part of being symptomatic of having a hypothyroidism issue. So they go hand in hand. Now, as far as the aspirin goes, I don't take aspirin regularly because that aggravates gout, and I have a history of gout. So one specialist is saying, take this. I don't care about your gout. You need to be on this. And another specialist is like, get off your aspirin because it's making this worse. So I was like, you know what do I do? Got to have thin blood. Well, I noticed over time, my blood is extremely thin doing a zero-carb carnivore diet. I used to have thick blood. A specialist once said it was like pancake batter going through my arteries. The red platelets were so crammed in my blood that it was like looking at a bunch of poker chips from a bird's eye view that are in a box where it's just shaken up, and then you take the lid off and all those poker chips, just like a packed box of poker chips, are all messed up in one box, like you just threw them in there. That's what my blood looked like under a microscope. He's like, you're pushing pancake batter. So he turned me on to a type of eating that really helped manage that. As well, he put me on supplementation, and within a month, it made a dramatic difference. When I have blood taken out of me, it goes really fast. So they're always commenting on how thin my blood is. So it's a nice place to be. You want thin blood if you have a history of heart disease. So when it comes to aspirin, I take aspirin every now and then. I'll take it if I've been too active or not very active. But typically, if it's just a day-to-day way of going, I don't take aspirin on a regular basis anymore because you don't want your blood too thin. You have to keep in mind that there's certain medications that are out there that top up what your body's not doing, and other ones that your body might need to combat some pretty serious issues. So my cardiologist, after I had my heart attack, put me on 2 different blood pressure medications. Well, I never had high blood pressure before this. They just put me on that medication anyway. And here's the frustrating part. After about 2 years of being on that medication, maybe a year and a half, I talked to my cardiologist about going off of it, and he was a real jerk about it. And so long story short, I was like, okay, I'm not going through him because he's going to be an idiot. And I know the importance of going off medications. You don't want to just go off a medication or start weaning down on your own. You want to make sure you do this doctor supervised. I can't stress that enough because certain medications you might be able to get away with just going off on your own. Other ones can cause some serious side effects when you start messing around with them. And so when you're doing blood pressure, for example, it can cause some very serious health problems if you just start weaning down or cutting out that medication on your own. So you want to make sure you're doctor supervised. I just can't stress that enough. So I went off my blood pressure medication with my doctors. I wasn't really approving it, but I just told him I'm not staying on this, because I actually talked to my pharmacist about it after a while. And he said, out of the 2 medications you're on, one of them is such a weak dose, it's a placebo. And then he stopped and corrected himself and said, it's virtually a placebo. So that one doesn't even matter if you're on that or not, because it's a joke that the doctor even put you on that strength to begin with. The one that's left, yeah, that'll help. But here's the problem. When I was on my high blood pressure medication, it gave me high blood pressure. When I went off of that medication, that went away. And I was doing a carnivore diet at the time, and I still was dealing with high blood pressure. And I was like, I've never had to deal with high blood pressure my whole life. So I thought, this is stupid. So I weaned off of that with my doctor's approval and also guidance. Now, if you're doing a medication and you don't notice any side effects, well, then you're probably in a good spot. Maybe it doesn't hurt to take it. Now, it doesn't mean that it's not causing any underlying problems. So you want to check to make sure what medications you have and what side effects they could be causing, because you may not relate one problem you're having with another that could be a symptom of that medication. So lots of times as a massage therapist, I'd have clients that had chronically tight backs, and it made no sense why maybe one side of their musculature in their back was kind of tight and spasmed, or maybe their whole back was like that. And I was like, this is not getting any better. What happens is it just starts to release on its own, and then it chronically learns to stay released instead of being chronically tightened. But when someone's muscles are chronically tight, I'm like, okay, how strong is your medication? How long have you been on it? And sure enough, most of those people were on cholesterol medications, and it was causing a lot of muscular tension in their back. So read up on your medications and what side effects they can have. Sometimes the side effects cause the actual problem you're trying to prevent. And so you want to make sure that you're not having some of these health problems based on what medications you have, or what's worse is sometimes people are on multiple medications and one is conflicting with another. So you might have to take them at separate times, or maybe just start weaning down. If your cholesterol is really low because you're on a cholesterol medication, does it need to be that low? Maybe you can go on a weaker version of that medication and talk to your doctor about the lifestyle changes you made going zero carb and carnivore, and a weaker dose might be a better number for you. I highly recommend you do some reading about this online. Talk to your doctors about that, because when you have really low cholesterol and you get into your 50s, 60s, and 70s, you can be increasing your risk for stroke. Now, a good doctor who's going to stay neutral and not try and push medications blindly will say, you know what, I'll look into this. And they'll hopefully have a good answer. But start looking into that. See what other doctors like Dr. Ken Berry says about that, because he'll tell you straight out, it's not good to have your cholesterol too low. We need cholesterol. Our brains are made out of cholesterol. Our nervous system's made out of cholesterol. Our body needs cholesterol to transport nutrients and hormones all through our body. We need cholesterol to make the hormones itself. So yeah, you want to watch that when you're on cholesterol medication. I'm not saying go off your cholesterol medication. I'm saying maybe you can find a sweet spot and a compromise with your cardiologist or doctor about your cholesterol medication. Because even if you have no symptoms, just the fact that you're in your 40s or 50s, doctors will often want to put you on cholesterol medication blindly. So I've actually lowered my thyroid medication recently, but I haven't just done it blindly. I was on 2 pills to get the proper dosage for my body, and I was talking to a naturopathic doctor, and your thyroid stimulating hormone is virtually zip. So you might have Hashimoto's disease. And I said to him, I was like, well, if my thyroid stimulating hormone is that low, is my medication too strong? And he said, quite possibly, yeah. So he said, you might want to consider lowering your medication. I was like, yeah, I was kind of thinking the same thing. So I went to my doctor and I said, okay, here's my situation. Should I lower my medication? She said, yeah, we can try lowering it, see how it goes. It kind of makes sense. And she said, we'll just take you off one of your pills, one of the 2 pills I'm taking for my thyroid medication. And I said, so what are we going to do it for, like a month and see how my body does? And she goes, no, let's give it more like 3 months. So here's the interesting thing. Even though I've lessened my medication, I've still lost a little bit of weight doing this. And typically when you have hypothyroidism, you balloon up. If your thyroid is off, you can just balloon right up. So when people go on about how it's all about calories and it's all about hormones, it's not about all of either. They play a part and they interact with each other. If you're getting too many calories and your hormones are off, that's a recipe for disaster, and you can balloon up really quick. If you have a condition like hypothyroidism where your insulin is too high, a little bit of calories or food intake go a long way. So just keep in mind, calories are a unit of measurement. I don't need to lecture on what a calorie is and how it doesn't apply. So I'm just using a commonly acknowledged term to express the fact that your energy intake is an imbalance with your body's hormones, and you can still put on weight even though you're not eating enough. So you want to find your sweet spot, of course, with your diet. Even if you're doing a zero-carb carnivore diet, you have to find your sweet spot with your food and your hormones. And you need to try and balance those two until your metabolism balances out really well. Maybe you can start eating more. And keep in mind, this is coming from a guy that used to be 465 pounds. And I lost weight eating 5 to 6 pounds of meat a day. So I was still eating a lot, losing weight. So it doesn't just come down to food intake. But the problem is I still have high fasting insulin. So we want to try and find a sweet spot with this. So if you're thinking about going off some of your medications, I think it's good if you're doing it doctor supervised. The problem is getting your doctor on board with that. The first thing you can do is try lowering your medications a little bit if it's something you want to get off of, or you don't like the way you feel on these medications. Maybe you need a new brand. Maybe you need a different type of medication. Maybe you need to be off that medication. So you don't want to just blindly follow your doctor. Learn for yourself, take some ownership in this, and then question your doctor on how we can tweak this. And most good doctors will like the fact that you don't need to be on your medications anymore, but you won't know how you respond until you start lowering those medications. Thanks a lot for tuning into this video. Don't do anything rash with your medications. Be safe.